When it comes to any popular multiplayer game, toxicity seems to always be a problem, and of course Overwatch is no exception. As such, it shouldn't surprise us that Blizzard is dedicating as much focus and effort as they are to trying to fix it. And if you remember one of my more recent videos talking about a community vote on things that Overwatch players hate, toxicity was up there on the first spot as well. So it shows that Blizzard's focus on this issue is also rubbing off on the player base. Now, if both the players and the developers agree that it is such a big problem, then why is it still a problem in the first place? We wouldn't be agreeing with their assessment, but then still practice the opposite of what we endorse, would we? Well, I mean, that's kind of hard to say, because on the one side, Blizzard is trying to sell Overwatch as a competitive game, and a lot of players want it to be competitive as well. And if we go back to that community poll and the accompanying answers to the votes, we learned that most people who don't care about toxicity as much are those who care more about, you guessed it, competition. When it comes to ranked players, to many of them it doesn't matter how something is said, as long as what they say is helping them win. The reason I'm bringing this up is because of an article from .esports.com covering statements from Blizzard regarding an increase in severity of punishment for players who participate in toxic behavior such as abusive chat. You can find the link in the description below if you're interested in the details, but for today's video I want to talk about the general game plan of going up against toxicity as much as they are. As noble of a goal as that is, on some point you have to wonder where that issue comes from. Sure, we can always just say that people are dicks on the internet because of that godforsaken level of anonymity, and those people are gonna be toxic no matter what you do anyway. But a topic I've talked about a lot in the past is that Overwatch itself is breeding toxicity, and you don't fix that by increasing the severity of punishment. You have to look for the root cause of that behavior or those feelings in general. So what about we do that exactly for today's video? But before we do that, I want to quickly announce that I have applied for the role of community lead for this year's Overwatch World Cup for Team Germany. So if you do live in Germany, please consider voting for me through the link in the description below. And don't forget that you have to log into your Battle.net account first before being able to vote. Now, something I want to bring up briefly without lingering on it for too long is false validation of gameplay performance. The reason it's important to bring up is because this happens a lot in Overwatch. The reason I don't want to linger on it for too long is because it's literally something I dedicated a whole video to about 1.5 years ago. When talking about false validation, think about you doing something that in a certain context could or couldn't be a good thing, but regardless of context, it is praised as the right thing to do. Like for example, punching people in the face. Hurting others is universally considered a bad thing, but there are circumstances where it's not. Imagine someone picking a fight with your friend and they won't stop beating them up. In that case, restraining them or otherwise knocking them out might be the best thing you can do to avoid anyone getting severely injured in the long run. It would universally be considered the right thing to do. Falsely validating this could mean that you say it's either always a good thing or always a bad thing. But just like with so many things in life, context matters. Now I know that's quite the shabby example, but the same thing happens in Overwatch. The game tells us that some things are objectively always a good thing. You got gold medals, you got a card at the end of the match, and you even got player of the game. All these things are celebrated by the game and always put in a good light with no consideration for the context in which they were achieved. You can get all the gold medals in the world, but if you refuse to work with your team, you are likely to still lose the match. End of game cards are absolutely arbitrary statistics that are meant to make us feel good for no reason anyway. And the play of the game is an algorithmically chosen flashy play that happened on some point throughout the match. A play that, mind you, might have even been the only useful thing you did all game long. The long and short of it is that the game does absolutely nothing to help players identify what's right or wrong in terms of gameplay. And even worse than that, it validates things that might as well be completely arbitrary. And if you need me to spell out why that could be causing toxicity, then I don't know that I can help you. Now, false validation aside, what has Blizzard done in the past 2 years of Overwatch being live? They have started a heavy crusade against toxicity. They haven't only openly spoken against the practice of participating in abusive chat behaviors, they have also introduced a new reporting system, new punishments, and they've also went as far as to working on a machine learning system to identify abusive chat and gameplay before it's even been reported. That last feature might not be out yet, but it shows just how much they care about keeping their game clean. And what haven't they done? According to the players, they have not meaningfully altered the matchmaker in a way that it creates more fair matches. They have not implemented separate environments and rule sets to properly split casual players from competitive players. They also have not introduced any incentives to playing the game properly on a competitive level. Most of what they talk about and all of what the player base picks up on is the fact that toxicity is bad and they want to fix that. But remember what I learned about my community during the poll I mentioned earlier in this video. There is a very clear split split in mentality where hyper-competitive players don't even care that much about toxicity. They don't care about someone having a rough or even rude tone as long as they play properly and communicate what's necessary. It is a bit of a long shot given that the poll only had about 7,000 votes, but if we wanted to, we could suggest that there's simply a disconnect between what is considered right or wrong, what is considered competitive and what isn't. Players are getting that much more toxic with each other because nobody can agree on a status quo. What do you think why one-tricking is so frowned upon in the competitive subreddit, whereas other social media channels almost create safe havens for those types of players? The game simply doesn't put in any meaningful rules to separate casual from competitive play. In fact, they sell casual play as competitive. Overwatch is the one competitive game on the market that makes casual players feel like they have a chance to compete because it is so inclusive. Characters with varying mechanics that allow anyone to find something they like and something that they're good at. No barrier to entry that demands any level of dedication to the competition. No punishment for participating in inherently anti-competitive behaviors. And no incentive to even play the game right in the first place. Quite the opposite. Players who do try to play properly almost feel punished for doing so. Six stacking, flex playing, and even active communication are often met with negative results. Long queue times, unfair matchmaking, an MMR system that favors hours played on single heroes over being a team player, and even other players complaining when you're communicating too much. So what does that tell us? That we're just being toxic because hey, it's the internet? Or that players are thrown into the same environment with no consideration for the type of gameplay experience that they are looking for? There is currently no true competition available in Overwatch unless you make it yourself. And here I am talking about scrimming teams and the like, which, let's be honest, that is a level of dedication that most people cannot possibly offer because of real-life responsibilities. And yet, we have a game mode called competitive play that really doesn't mind whether you actually care about the competition or not. So you have players who are looking to be competitive who have to deal with the frustration of being matched with those who don't. Now, don't get me wrong. In my opinion, saying things in a respectful manner falls under socializing 101. And if you cannot communicate with other players online without throwing in cusses and insults all the time, then there's obviously something very wrong with you. But fact of the matter is that a lot of players who do want that competition do not care about toxicity anywhere near as much as those who are, well, just looking to play for fun. In our current environment, one person's fun ruins the fun of another person. We have to pray to our Lord and Savior Jeff Kaplan that the matchmaker tosses us into a match with 5 other truly competitive players who all want to take the game seriously. Or on the other side of the spectrum, hoping that the game does not give us 5 toxic tryhards who shout and yell all the time. Wouldn't the solution be to give both of these groups each their respective game mode rather than sending a bot looking for bad words in chat to preemptively ban players? I feel like most people should agree with the notion of wanting to play with like-minded players. So why not leave the presumably toxic players to each other and strive to play with those who have as much of a laid-back mentality as yourself? We have reached a point where the frustration in the community is only growing with every new patch, and I don't know if Blizzard is really approaching this issue from the right angle. I mean, sure, we got news of them wanting to put in new social features and the like, but at this point, I'm kinda doubtful that they really know where to attack this problem to fix it once and for all, rather than putting band-aids over band-aids. The reason I feel like there's a bit of a disconnect between the developers and players is because of the decisions they made so far. Muting toxic players is not helping the competitive scene of your game. It only puts players at a disadvantage if they have someone on their team who cannot communicate with them. In a competitive sense, that punishment makes absolutely no sense, and it would be way better served to give these players a warning and then straight up suspension afterwards. Things like that are why I think that they are approaching this issue from an entirely wrong angle. It's impossible for me to speak for the entire community because of how many sub-communities have developed throughout the years. Everyone seems to have different ideas of what makes a game mode competitive and what should or shouldn't be allowed. While the solution is obviously not to create 300 different ladders, I do think that a big issue lies with the fact that we are all cramped in the same game mode when, very clearly, we are looking for different experiences entirely. But hey, at the end of the day, that's just my 2 cents on it. So I'm gonna call it a day now. Thank you everybody so much for watching. As always, feel free to leave your own thoughts and opinions on the subject in question down in the comment section below. While you're down there, don't forget to drop me a like on your way out if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and don't forget to consider voting for me as your community lead for this year's Overwatch World Cup if you live in Germany. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you all next time.
Who's ready for my play of the game?
I'm so ready, dude. You're so Zen was crazy good. Holy shit.
On the lockers, dog.
What? How is this even possible? Oh, I'm playing skill red. J lol KE.
What? What?
I'm weak, bro.